DarkEcho production. Some stories are forgotten, others refuse to stay buried. Blackwater Lake, Episode 3, The Man Who Stayed. 3 days after the voicemail, Tyler drove north. He wasn't alone. Alyssa sat beside him. Jacob, Mia, and Nolan followed in a second vehicle. None of them wanted to return, but none of them could ignore what was happening. The highway grew emptier with every mile. The towns became smaller. The forests grew thicker. Conversations slowly disappeared. No music played. No one checked their phones. Every now and then, someone caught their own reflection in a window, then quickly looked away. Nearly 4 hours later, the old gas station came into view. It looked exactly the way they remembered. 2 rusted pumps, a faded wooden sign, a soda machine that probably hadn't worked in years. Only one truck sat outside. Its tires were coated in dried mud. Tyler shut off the engine. For a moment, no one moved. Finally, Alyssa opened her door. A small bell rang as they entered the station. The smell of old coffee and motor oil filled the room. Shelves lined with dusty cans, fishing bait, maps, things people stopped buying years ago. Behind the counter stood an old man, gray beard, weathered hands, reading glasses resting low on his nose. He looked up, smiled politely. Then his eyes met Tyler's. The smile vanished. He looked at each of them, one after another. His face turned pale. "No." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "You came back." Nobody answered. The old man closed the book he'd been reading, locked the front door, turned the sign around, closed. He pulled the blinds shut over every window. The room grew darker. Jacob exchanged a nervous glance with Tyler. The old man walked behind the counter, stopped only a few feet from them. Did she appear in the reflections? Nobody spoke. He nodded slowly. "I was afraid. That's what you were going to say." Alyssa felt her stomach tighten. "Who is she?" The old man didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the dusty mirror hanging near the coffee machine. Its surface was cloudy, scratched, almost impossible to see yourself in. Almost. Without taking his eyes off the mirror, he spoke. "Around here, we don't keep good mirrors." Silence. They help her find people. The room became perfectly still. Tyler swallowed. "What do you mean, find people?" The old man finally looked back at them. His eyes were tired, not frightened, tired, like a man who had spent too many years waiting for the same conversation. "Sit down, because if you've already seen her, you're running out of time." Nobody sat down. Not at first. The old man's words hung in the air. "You're running out of time." Tyler stepped forward. "What does that mean?" The old man studied each face, one by one. Then he quietly sighed. "You've already made the first mistake." Jacob frowned. "What mistake?" The old man looked toward the cloudy mirror hanging beside the coffee machine. "You looked back." Silence. Mia spoke softly. "We didn't know." "I know. Nobody ever does." The old man walked behind the counter. He opened an old wooden drawer. Inside were newspapers, yellowed, brittle, some so old their edges had turned brown. He carried them to the table. One by one, he spread them out. Missing camper, family disappears, local fisherman never returned, vehicle found near Blackwater Road, no witnesses, no answers, no bodies. Alyssa stared at the headlines. "These are all from here?" The old man nodded. "Most people never make the connection. They blame the woods, the lake, an accident." He looked back at them, but it was never the lake. The room fell silent. Tyler spoke carefully. "Then what is it?" The old man closed his eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. When he finally opened them, there was sadness behind them. "I don't know." The answer caught everyone off guard. "You don't know?" Jacob asked. The old man shook his head. "I know what it does. I know where it appears. I know how people disappear." He looked at the mirror again. "But I don't know what she is." Another silence, longer than the last. Then Nolan asked the question none of them wanted answered. "Has anyone ever survived?" The old man didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly rolled his left sleeve toward his elbow. Across his forearm were dozens of thin scars, perfectly straight, running from wrist to elbow. Not random, intentional. Mia whispered, "What happened?" The old man covered his arm again. "Every year, I test whether I still bleed." Nobody understood. He looked toward the front door. "Because one day, I stopped appearing in mirrors." The room became impossibly still. Tyler's mouth went dry. "What?" The old man walked slowly to the cloudy mirror. He stood directly in front of it. The 5 friends watched his reflection. There wasn't one. Only the empty room behind him. Jacob stumbled backward. "No, that's impossible." The old man didn't react. "That's what I said 43 years ago." Nobody spoke. Outside, the wind began to rise. The old wooden building creaked. Then, from somewhere deep inside the station, came the unmistakable sound of dripping water. Drip, drip, drip. The old man's face lost what little color remained. Very quietly, he whispered, "She found us." Nobody moved. The dripping continued. Drip, drip, drip. The old man held up one hand. "Don't." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Nobody, look for it." Tyler frowned. "What?" "The sound. Never follow the water." Silence. The old man walked slowly toward the back of the station. The others followed. The dripping grew louder. Drip, drip. It wasn't coming from the ceiling, or the sink, or the pipes. It seemed to move, almost as if the sound were walking through the building. The old man stopped. He pointed toward an old storage room. The door was closed. "Stay here." Without waiting for an answer, he stepped inside. The door closed behind him. Silence. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then, the dripping stopped. The old man opened the door. "She's gone." Jacob stared. "What did you do?" The old man shook his head. "Nothing. Sometimes she only wants to know where you are." Nobody liked that answer. They returned to the front of the station. The old man sat heavily in a wooden chair. 43 years teaches you a few things. Tyler leaned forward. "Tell us." The old man nodded slowly. Rule 1. Never stare into a reflection. If you notice something wrong, look away immediately. He raised one finger. Rule 2. Never answer a voice that comes from the other side. Mia frowned. The other side? Mirrors, windows, still water. If someone calls your name from inside, don't answer, even if it sounds exactly like someone you love. A chill ran through the room. The old man raised a second finger. Rule 3. Never break the reflection. Jacob blinked. What? People panic. They smash the mirror, the window, the television. He looked at Jacob. That has never saved anyone. He raised one final finger. And the last rule. The room fell silent. If you ever see her looking away, run. Nobody spoke. Tyler frowned. Looking away? Yes. If she's looking at you, she's watching. If she's looking somewhere else. The old man's voice became almost inaudible. She's watching. Someone behind you. Silence. No one dared to turn around. The old man looked from face to face. You're thinking, these rules will save you. Another pause. They won't. Tyler stared. Then why? Tell us. The old man's eyes filled with quiet sadness. Because they'll help you live a little longer. The station fell silent. Outside, a truck pulled up to the pumps. An elderly woman stepped out. She smiled through the window and waved. The old man didn't wave back. Instead, his expression turned to horror. Very slowly, he whispered, "She came for someone else." Nobody said a word. The old man's final rule echoed inside their heads. If she's looking away, run. Outside, rainwater dripped slowly from the roof onto the cracked pavement. The elderly woman finished pumping gas. She smiled through the station window. The old man didn't smile back. His face had become completely still. "Lock the door." Tyler frowned. "What?" "Now." Without asking again, Tyler reached over and turned the deadbolt. The loud click echoed through the station. The woman looked confused. She walked toward the entrance. She pulled on the handle. Locked. She laughed, thinking it was a mistake. She knocked softly. The old man closed his eyes. "Don't," he whispered. "Open it." The woman pointed to the sign. She couldn't hear them. She simply shrugged and smiled again. Jacob took one step toward the door. "We can't just leave her out there." The old man grabbed Jacob's arm, hard enough to hurt. "Look at her." Everyone looked. The woman was still smiling, still waiting, still tapping lightly on the glass. Then, without warning, she stopped. Her smile vanished, not slowly, instantly. Her eyes shifted, not toward the station, past it, as if someone had just walked behind them. The old man's face drained of color. "Nobody. Turn around." Nobody moved. The woman took one slow step backward, then another. She wasn't looking at the station anymore. She was watching something behind the people inside. Tears filled her eyes. She slowly raised one trembling hand, not toward the station, toward whatever stood behind them. Then she whispered something. They couldn't hear it, but they all read her lips. "Please." Her body went completely still. The rain continued falling. Then every puddle around the gas station began to ripple. Not from raindrops, from underneath. The old man covered his face. "Don't watch." Nobody listened. The woman's reflection appeared inside the largest puddle, but it wasn't copying her. The reflection was facing the opposite direction, looking at her. Slowly, it began walking. The real woman never moved. The reflection took another step, then another, until it stood directly in front of her. The reflection lifted one hand, touched the woman's face. Outside, the real woman closed her eyes. One tear rolled down her cheek. Then she smiled. Not her smile, someone else's. A slow, empty, knowing smile. She turned, walked calmly back to her car, opened the driver's door, sat down, started the engine, and drove away. Nobody inside the station moved. Nobody breathed. Tyler finally whispered, "What just happened?" The old man never looked away from the road. "She's alive." A long pause. For now, Alyssa frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man slowly sat down. His voice had become little more than a whisper. "Once your reflection touches you, you never come back." Silence. You just keep living until it decides it doesn't need you anymore. Nobody knew what to say. Outside, the woman's car disappeared around the bend. The old man looked at Alyssa. "Tomorrow, we go to the church, because there's one person who knows what happened before I did." The old man didn't unlock the gas station door until the woman's car had completely disappeared. Even then, he waited, listening. watching the road, as though he expected the vehicle to return. Tyler stood near the counter. His hands were trembling. He tried to hide it. Nobody mentioned that they had noticed. Alyssa looked toward the puddles outside. The rain had weakened. The reflections were broken now, distorted by the falling water. She was grateful for that. Jacob finally spoke. "You said she's still alive." The old man kept watching the road. "Her body is." Mia swallowed. "And the rest of her?" He slowly looked back at them. "That depends on how much the reflection has taken." Silence. Nolan folded his arms. "Taken what?" The old man walked behind the counter. He reached beneath it and pulled out a small metal box. It was rusted, locked with a tiny brass latch. He placed it on the table. "Memories." Alyssa stared at him. The word felt heavier than it should have. "She takes memories?" The old man nodded. "At first, little things. Names, faces, places." He opened the metal box. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Old family pictures, school portraits, wedding photographs, vacation snapshots. Some were faded, some were stained with water. And in every photograph, someone had been scratched out. Not with a pen, not cut away. The image itself had faded where the person should have been. Tyler picked up one photograph. It showed a family of 4 standing beside a small fishing boat. A father, a mother, 2 children. But between them was an empty space. The people on either side stood too far apart. Their arms curved around someone who was no longer there. Tyler looked up. Who was missing? The old man shook his head. "I don't remember." Alyssa felt a chill move through her. "These were your family?" "Some of them." He pointed toward another picture. A younger version of the old man stood beside a woman near the lake. His arm was wrapped around her shoulders. She was smiling, beautiful, alive. But the old man looked at her as though she were a stranger. "Who is she?" Mia asked. The old man stared at the photograph for a long time, then quietly said, "I don't know anymore." Nobody moved. His voice remained calm, but his eyes were wet. "She was important, I know that. I can feel the space where she used to be." He closed the box. "But I can't remember her name." Alyssa looked at her friends. Tyler, Jacob, Mia, Nolan. She knew every face, every voice, every shared memory. Then, for one terrible second, she couldn't remember where she had met Nolan. The memory was simply gone. She stared at him. He noticed. "What?" Alyssa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then the memory returned. College, a crowded party, Nolan spilling a drink on Tyler's shoes. Alyssa took a sharp breath. The old man saw her expression. "What did you lose?" She looked at him. "I didn't lose anything." His face hardened. "Don't lie. Not about that." Alyssa lowered her voice. "For a second, I couldn't remember how I met Nolan." Nobody spoke. Nolan's face slowly changed. Not anger, fear. The old man closed his eyes. "It's starting." Tyler stepped forward. "Then take us to the church." The old man looked toward the dark windows. "Not tonight." "Why?" "Because the road doesn't stay in the same place after dark." Jacob laughed once. A short, nervous sound. "Roads don't move." The old man looked directly at him. "Neither do reflections." No one argued. They spent the night inside the station. The old man covered every mirror with thick cloth. He turned the television toward the wall. He poured sand into the bathroom sink so no water could collect there. Before allowing them to sleep, he gave each person a black marker. "Write your name on your arm." Mia frowned. "Why?" "So when you wake up, you'll know who you are." The lights were turned off. No one slept. At dawn, the old man unlocked the door. The storm had passed. The road was dry. The puddles were gone. Alyssa looked at the name written across her arm. Alyssa. The letters were still there, but underneath them, someone had written another name. In wet, black ink, a name none of them recognized. Eleanor. The old man stared at it. His face slowly collapsed. He reached for the old photograph inside the metal box. The woman standing beside him was no longer faded. Her face was clear again, and written on the back in his own handwriting was the same name, Eleanor. The old man's hands began to shake. "My wife," he whispered. Then, from the covered mirror behind the counter, came the soft sound of someone quietly laughing. Morning arrived quietly. No rain, no wind, only a cold, gray sky stretching over the forest. Nobody said much. The old man loaded a worn canvas bag into the back of Tyler's SUV. Inside were old journals, maps, several candles, a rusted lantern, and one small wooden box wrapped carefully inside a faded blanket. Tyler looked at it. "What's in the box?" The old man didn't answer. He simply closed the tailgate. "Let's go." The drive lasted nearly 40 minutes. No highway, no houses, only narrow roads winding through endless forest. Eventually, the trees opened. A small hill stood ahead. At its summit was an old church. White paint peeled from the walls. The steeple leaned slightly to one side. Broken stained glass caught the morning light. It looked abandoned, forgotten. The old man stopped walking. "This place saved my life." Alyssa looked up. "It doesn't look like anyone's been here for years." "It hasn't." Jacob pushed open the heavy wooden door. It groaned loudly. Dust floated through the sunlight. The air inside felt strangely cold. Rows of empty pews filled the room. An old piano sat quietly against one wall. Everything looked ordinary until Tyler noticed something. There isn't a single mirror. Everyone looked around. He was right. No mirrors, no polished metal, no glass. Even the stained glass windows had been painted from the inside. Nothing could reflect. The old man nodded slowly. The priest covered them himself. Every one. Alyssa whispered, "Why?" The old man looked toward the altar. "Because he learned what reflections really are." Silence. He walked behind the altar, kneeled, brushed away years of dust. Beneath an old rug was a heavy iron ring set into the floor. Tyler stepped closer. "What's under there?" The old man's face grew pale. Something that should have stayed buried. Together, Tyler and Jacob pulled. The wooden hatch creaked open. Cold air rose slowly from the darkness below. Stone steps disappeared into the earth. No one moved. The old man lit the lantern. Its warm light barely reached the bottom. This church was never built to worship. He looked at each of them. It was built to guard the doorway. Nobody breathed. "Doorway?" Mia whispered. The old man nodded. "The lake isn't where she came from. It's where she escaped." The lantern flame began to flicker, not from wind, from something moving below. Very slowly, a second light appeared deep inside the darkness. Not a lantern. Two pale white eyes, watching, unblinking. The old man's hand tightened around the lantern. His voice shook. "Close it. Now." Nobody moved. The eyes blinked once. Then a woman's voice echoed softly up the stone stairs. Not loud, barely a whisper. "You finally came back." The lantern went out. Complete darkness.